A-Trak on the track.
Let me take it to the queen side. I'm taking it to Brooklyn side. But now, let me take it to the queen side. I'm taking it to Brooklyn side. But now, let me take it to the queen side. I'm taking it to Brooklyn side. But now, let me take it to the queen side. I'm taking it to Brooklyn side. But now, let me take it to the queen side. I'm taking it to Brooklyn side. But now, let me take it to the queen side. I'm taking it to Brooklyn side. But now, let me take it to the queen side. I'm taking it to Brooklyn side. But now, let me take it to the queen side. I'm taking it to Brooklyn side, but now let me take it to the queen side. I'm taking it to Brooklyn side, but now let me take it to the queen side. I'm taking it to Brooklyn side, but now. Drop it on the angle, they're cute at that. So who that, do that, do that, that. Drop it on the angle, they're cute at that. So who that, do that, do that, that. Drop it on the angle, they're cute at that. Drop it on the angle, they're cute at that. Drop it on the angle, they're cute at that. So who that, do that, do that, that. 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 I'm bugging. Who that, do that, do that, that. 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 I'm bugging. Who that, do that, do that, that. Who that, do that, do that, that. I'm bugging. I'm bugging. Alert. I'm bugging. I'm bugging. I'm bugging. I'm bugging. I'm bugging out. I'm bugging out.
It's time for the it's time for the perk. 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 It's time for the perk.
Welcome to our world of merry music, where everybody lends a helping hand, spreading our message to the people, moving them the best that we can. Welcome to our world of merry, merry,
should I mute also? Yeah.
Fool's gold.
It would help if I unmuted my mic. Welcome, everyone. How y'all doing? Friends, foes, interlopers? How's everyone's week going? We're going to get to our very special guest, A-Trak, in a moment. For those just joining us, we do this every Friday. What's up to the chat? I see we got Rowland, DLG, Nick, what's good? Poppy, to our new friends. Stick around. We're going to cover all sorts of ground today. Our guest, fellow Canadian, we're on a roll here. This is the fourth Canadian in a row, which is totally a coincidence. But hails from Montreal. We're going to speak to that a little bit. Send in your questions. Oh, he's hanging out in the chat already. He's ready to go. And then we got a few demos as usual, and we're going to go through, for those that are just joining us for the first time, every Friday at the end of Phone a Friend, we go through some of your demos and try to help you finish those tracks. It's all love. It's all good. Let me know where y'all tuning in from. Our guest today needs no introduction, but you know, if you've been living under a rock, he won. He's the world's youngest DMC champ at age 15. Toured extensively with Kanye for several years, all around the world. Founded the seminal dance label Fool's Gold in 2007. And you might know him from some of the biggest dance records over the last decade as part of Duck Sauce with Armand Van Helden. He's Grammy nominated. It's been on the cover of Billboard and everything. I mean, I should just be reading the Wikipedia, but I'm not on that page. So without further ado, today's guest is A-Trak. How you doing, man?
Unmuting.
Unmuting. Oh, yeah, I've got...
Am I good? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm going to adjust the Zoom screen because every time I open the Zoom, it changes up. I'm just learning this thing. How you doing, though?
I'm zooming.
You zooming?
I'm good. Yeah.
I noticed that you've been getting into interview mode yourself lately. How's that
A little
going?
bit. Yes, I don't know. I've just been... the Duck Duck Goose stuff has been fun, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, even just with something like that, it's like, you know, we had planned this big relaunch for Duck Sauce this year, but so much of it was on the back of touring.
Right.
You know, so we made a ton of new music last year, and we were like, all right, 2020, let's kick it off with Coachella, Tomorrowland, Block Party in the Bay. This another big event in New York that was going to be towards the end of the year. And then all that stuff went out the window, obviously.
Right.
So, you know, part of what led us to doing Duck Duck Goose, the new interview show on YouTube that we launched recently, is just thinking like, all right, well, what else can we do to keep a conversation around Duck Sauce when you remove the live element, which was always the sort of backbone
Right.
For that project. And, you know, we're looking forward to touring again when it's safe. But in the meantime, we still wanted to get back in the water a little bit. The ducks wanted to still get their feathers wet. So, you know, we started doing these little interviews, and we got other stuff cooking, and, you know, more actual releases in the fall and continuing for a while. But that's also been just a way for us to have fun. You know, like I haven't seen Armand in so long because everybody's in separate cities and separated. And we have a bunch of, you know, wacky friends that are fun to talk to. So we just thought, like, let's just like talk to our homies and just, you know, do something fun in the meantime.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a lot of fun. If anyone hasn't watched it, so far you've done 2 episodes, or at least you've aired 2 episodes with David Guetta and Todd Terry, 2
Todd
legends.
Terry.
The story.
But then next week, you'll see next week's episode is going to show where the range of the season.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not going to reveal it yet, but I will say that we started with Todd Terry and David Guetta, meaning other dance music DJs.
Sure.
There's more to Duck Sauce than DJing and dance music.
Okay.
So we're going to show a little bit more of our wingspan as Ducks next week with a little bit more of a more esoteric interview, and then it's just going to keep going from there. We've already taped a bunch of the interviews, so there's some pretty wacky, crazy stuff that's going to drop in the coming weeks that goes well beyond the world of DJing.
And more avian analogies, I would expect.
Yeah.
Just got a whole bunch.
Always.
how did Duck Sauce? I mean, I've heard you refer to Armand as your best friend on the interview. Like, how did that? I guess we're gonna turn back the clock a little bit. How did that first that connection first happen for you guys and the project after that?
Yeah, I also sometimes refer to him as my guru. It's kind of a life guru. Armand and I met when I moved to New York in 2006. We actually met through P Thug from Chromeo.
Hmm.
Um, him and P Thug are kind of doppelgangers. Like they look like the same person in two different bodies. Um, and they had met, maybe a few months prior, and P was like, "I can't believe you don't know A-Trak," telling Todd because P and I, grew up together, and yeah, so just he was kind of telling Armand like, "You got to meet A-Trak," and then Armand had just heard "Dirty South Dance," which was a mixtape that I did around 2006, where I was like mixing up electro, house, and rap acapellas. And Armand, when he heard that, he told me later on he wanted to meet me because there wasn't a lot of people at that time that were kind of merging hip hop and house culture.
Right.
Um, so he was kind of like he was familiar with my DMC stuff, but he also saw where I was kind of going around that time. So we connected and we just became buddies and we started hanging out and didn't actually make music together for a while. I
Hmm.
didn't realize at first that Armand just kind of chills all the time. He's not. We know so many DJs and producers who grind shit out
Right.
and who are on like 4 espressos a day
Right.
and who spend hours and hours and hours tuning hi-hats, whose hi-hats are on key with their bass line,
Right.
and who like, will compare 4 different multi-band compressors and all that kind of shit, and who
Sure.
churn out 100 demos to keep one. That is the opposite of Armand Zen Helden. I didn't realize what beast I was dealing with yet. So at first I remember being like, oh, I got this new project I'm producing, Kid Sister. Do you want to like maybe submit some tracks? And he'd be like, I'm kind of just chilling, but do you want to come over tomorrow and like watch some yacht rock music videos? And I'd be like, sure, I'm down for that. So we would, watch some yacht rock videos. And then I remember being like, oh, do you want to do a remix for this new guy we got on the label, Treasure Fingers? He's like, I'm kind of just sunbathing this week, but do you want to come over and watch some like, you know, little little known early 80s old school rap videos? And I'd be like, oh sure, I'm down to watch like, Fat Boys sound alikes. And we would just kind of bond over that shit. And after a while I realized that he's the kind of guy like he had just made Bonkers, the Dizzy Rascal track, which was like a #1 in a bunch of countries. That's like the one song he made that year, and it went to #1. That he's that guy. He'll like literally sunbathe and um, buy weird esoteric books from people on the sidewalk, and like go shop for vintage T-shirts, and then he'll sit down one day and be like, "I'm gonna make a track today," and it'll be "I Want Your Soul," and then
Wow.
he's gonna chill for like 6 months. Like I've never met anybody like that. Who's that? Like if life is a game of darts, right? He'll just be like, I'm gonna shoot a dart today, and it's like bullseye. Okay, cool. I think I'm gonna like give myself a haircut and like go run after like chase girls.
Right.
Um,
That's
so we just
incredible.
kind of hung out for a while, and like, yeah, we kind of had that like hip hop meets house thing in common, but also musical taste in common. I think we also bonded over the fact that we don't actually listen to dance music at home.
Hmm.
So we could just talk about Phil Collins for hours or talk about whatever else and just like, listen to that kind of records and maybe once in a while the music that we actually make comes up, but not really, you know? It was a lot of bonding over like Eddie Money, you know what I mean? And like
Right.
the Kiss solo albums and
Right.
shit like that. And then one day, so I stopped asking him about the music thing. I realized that he kind of was chilling.
Right.
And then one day, 2 or 3 years into being buds. Oh, and the other thing I should mention is like, here's the thing: when you meet the older house heads, right? When you meet people who've been in the house scene since the early '90s or whenever, you got some that are really bitter and some that aren't. And there's once it gets to a certain age, There's a big divide.
Right.
Armand's whole thing is he's not bitter. He's not one of the guys who would just be like, man, the good old days, right? And I think like, um, I met him in 2006. Like in those years, as we all know, like the sound of electronic music was really changing. This was when like the blog thing was kind of happening, and Armand was really into all that new electro stuff. And I had just moved to New York and I was like active in that scene and I would, you know, go and hang out at Studio B or whatever venues and go watch the Crookers and Switch and, that whole scene. And Sinden would be in town and that kind of shit. And Armand was excited about that. And I kind of realized later on, I was kind of his in to this new thing that was going on that he thought was dope. So we would just go out and like bar hop, and then yeah, like I mentioned, hang out listening to like Donald Fagen cuts. Um, and yeah, like maybe 2 or 3 years later, one day he was like, "Hey, I was thinking maybe we should make some tracks together," and we made Anyway, and and then we made a couple of other tracks. We made Anyway, You're Nasty,
Mm.
that first run of songs, and that's when the duck took flight.
So, I mean, first off, that's an incredible story about Armand. I don't know that anyone like I had no idea, and I think through the interviews, that starts to come through his chillness. I mean, he talking about
Dude, it's
hanging out
incredible.
with Todd and they're just going to hip hop clubs because
Yeah.
it's not work.
Yeah.
This is to hang out and have a drink or whatever, and it's also sort of like counter to every New York stereotype, like the kind of type of person that lives in the city and like
For sure. For sure, but Armand is very worldly. Like his dad was in the military his whole life, and so he's kind of grown up all over the world. And his family's from all over. He's like Armand is Dutch, Indonesian, French, Lebanese, right? And then grew up in Boston a little bit, but then he spent childhood in like Italy and then other places. He's just kind of lived all over, and he has this very worldly perspective, which will make anyone a little bit less fidgety, I think, because like you've seen different sort of variations of what the hell life is.
Right.
So if one thing is crazy, in your little bubble, you've also seen other versions of how things can go. And so he's one of those guys that's just kind of seen a lot and has this real wisdom to him. Like nothing stresses him out. And I met him when I was a fucking ball of stress, trying to teach myself how to produce more, like trying to go from being this, sort of scratch wonder kid that didn't really know how to do anything else than scratching at first, to trying to learn how to produce and remixes and da da da. And it was the MySpace days, and we were like figuring out how to brand shit, and then eventually Fool's Gold, and you know, um, different types of production and all this stuff. So I was like just putting all this pressure on myself to figure out all this new shit that ended up being my identity to this day. But it was a lot of grind. And then I would go hang out with him, and he just seemed like he had everything figured out. um, so that's kind of the vibe of Duck Sauce, where like it's really a mix between our energies and our worlds. And he also has an amazing knowledge of records.
Right.
So really, the majority of samples are he finds them, and we link up, and he plays me shit, and I'll just be like, "Let's do this one today," and then we produce them together.
So I mean, while we're on Duck Sauce, I mean, can you talk a little bit about? I guess the first one was Anyway with Your Nasty, right? That came out officially, and then I don't remember how much further it was down the line before Barbra Streisand started to leak in people's sets and things like that.
Yeah, it was a year later.
Okay.
It was a year later. For a while, we were putting out a single every year. For a while, we would tease a song at Winter Music Conference, which is a very old school thing to do, and then put it out a few months later. That first year, we put out Anyway, You're Nasty, but we also put out an EP called Greatest Hits, which was our first record. And it had Anyway, You're Nasty, but also Grand Steppin' and The Motion.
Yeah.
And then, Barbara was the next year, and Barbara was, I've said this in a lot of interviews,
Right.
we didn't even think it was an A-side. We thought Barbara was a funny song, and it was kind of like meant to be the lighthearted B-side of something else.
Right.
So that was the second year. Then the following year was Big Bad Wolf.
Right.
And then from that point on, we started putting together the album, which ended up taking many years because of sample clearances and shit. But
Right.
eventually, Quack came out in 2014.
Which was nominated for a Grammy. Which I mean, it's something for on your
Barbara
list.
was, yeah.
Barbara,
Yeah,
right.
thanks.
But
Yeah, that was crazy.
so how
I
were
mean,
you?
but the
Sort
other
of,
thing that was
yeah.
interesting to think back on is Barbara came out right before EDM happened.
Right.
It was, because like when you think about it, 2006 or so was like the sort of the electro scene. 2006, 7, 8, 9. Electro was still very indie.
Mm-hmm.
It was sort of the Justice and Mastercraft era where it was still kind of cool parties and Cobra Snake photo galleries and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2000 like 10 or 11, shit went through the roof with EDM and Skrillex and David Guetta and Dead Mouse and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Um, Barbara Streisand came out at the end of 2010, and there was a bunch of countries where it was number one in like I think 11 countries in mostly in Europe.
Wow.
But there was a few countries where we were just neck to neck with. It's funny to think about the other records that came out at that time. CeeLo, Fuck You. I think there might have been a Bruno Mars record and Swedish House Mafia 1, which to me is like the start of EDM.
Right.
So Barbra Streisand came out, the video went viral. Even that word wasn't even really a thing back then.
Yeah.
And a couple months later, everything is Swedish and Dutch, So even by the time we did Big Bad Wolf the following year,
Mm-hmm.
that was a very underground kind of sound compared to what was becoming
Poppin'.
the norm, which was very maximal.
Yep.
And by the time the album came out, like 2-3 years later, we were just sort of going against the current and making, like the Duck Sauce album Quack was biggest influence is probably like De La Soul's first album as far as skits and just goofball shit. And all these labels were hollering at us because Barbra Streisand was a big hit.
Right.
But they thought but by then dance music sounded like Alesso.
Mm-hmm.
With no offense, I think Alesso is super dope, but like that wasn't our sound.
Right.
We were still making shit that, we were trying to make shit that sounded like Beat Nuts meets Kenny Dope. So we were just not in that zone with like Wu-Tang skits. Like we were just not on the same page as what was going on, in the mainstream.
Hard to kill the backpacker in you.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
How did that? So then, how were you juggling? Like, obviously, you got Fool's Gold, which was by that time already, I imagine, full speed ahead, as well as A-Trak stuff, and I imagine the Duck Sauce requests are coming in hot and heavy.
Yeah. How was I managing all that?
Yeah. How were you sort of ordering?
Yeah, it's a lot, but the thing is, I kind of thrive when I have a few things to work on. But what's dangerous is sometimes the balance will tip to where it's a little too much, and then I'll get overwhelmed or whatever. But if I'm only working on one or two things, I don't get that inspired and like I sort of dilly dally and
Right.
just sort of kick the can down the road. But if I'm working on like 4 or 5 things, I'm having a ball and I'm like coming up with new ideas and just in the best space that I can be. So I liked having early Fool's Gold, my own productions and remixes, Duck Sauce, certain points in time, stuff with Cameron, stuff with Lex Luger, other collaborators. Then later on it would be, other projects. At one point even Travis Barker, now more recently with my brother. Like I like having all these different things. Also because each one of those projects has a clear-cut identity in my head. It's all buckets. So, and then all the live stuff too, turntablism routines and all that kind of shit. So if I have an idea, I place it in a bucket mentally.
Okay.
So an idea for a song, maybe it's Duck Sauce, maybe it's an A-Trak solo record.
Mm-hmm.
One of those is a definite. Do you know what I mean? Like there's never a song where I'm like, oh, I don't know if I should call this, if I should put this in the Duck Sauce bucket, or if I should put this in some other thing.
So early on, you already kind of know.
Yeah, and I like having a few of those buckets in my head, and whenever whenever I'm like not too inspired about one thing, there's three other things that are right there that need my attention. So maybe I'll go work on some fool's gold outreach or
Right.
chase down some new artists, or maybe I'll, just try a routine or something. And I tend to take on a little too much. And you and I have messed around with demo ideas together. So sometimes there's like many weeks where I don't get to something,
Right.
but that's still where my ideas are the best. Is when I'm jumping from one thing to the next, because I'm all my days are broken up into chunks of one thing, another thing, and like my ideas come faster when I work that way.
That
Some
make
people are able to just like sit down and focus for a full week and make 40 demos. I'm not good at that. Or like, if I do that, it means I haven't done that in months and there's a backlog of months and months of ideas.
right.
I'm good at bouncing from one thing to the other. But also, when you're talking about duck sauce requests and that kind of thing, that all the things that we're sort of picking up, there's also just the power of no, which is
Mm,
super important. Really keeping track of what the vision is and how to get the vision across and what I want to accomplish with any one of those projects, and being totally okay with with a polite no to things that get sent to my attention or whatever,
right.
whether it's remix requests that aren't that interesting, or you know what I mean, certain things that just don't fit the um the mood board.
Hmm.
Although I hate that word, but you know what I mean, like keep staying very strict with what the plan is for each one of those projects.
Right.
Not only does it allow that project to thrive, each one of those projects to thrive, because everything is very defined, but also it's even a way for me to manage my own time and energy, where like I'm just not going to take on something that is not constructive or conducive to what I'm trying to build.
Right.
You know what I mean? So just turning down a lot of stuff has helped.
How has it been? You mentioned briefly your new project with your brother, which is
Yeah.
maybe the first official
Mm-hmm.
artist project. But
Mm-hmm.
uh, for anyone that isn't aware, this is Dave of Chromeo.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how working alongside, I mean, as Chromeo was coming up in that wave of 2007, 2006, 2007, 2008, and I think maybe a lot of people aren't maybe not aware that you're sort of like a ghost Chromeo member, like
Yeah, for sure. I'm the ghost third member,
yeah, like so how was that?
but Dave's also the third Duck Sauce member. So we're just like
Right.
always involved with our shit.
Right. So what? How would you describe that sort of relationship, like working on Chromeo stuff, and how that might inform? Like, I imagine you guys must have disagreements as brothers do. Yeah. Can you just speak to that whole dynamic a little bit?
Yeah. Doing the Brothers Maklovich project has actually been super fun and also like very healthy between me and Dave. Like we've butted heads so much about so many other things, but
Hmm.
never on these records that we're making together, because I think we both came at it with this sort of respect that we're each going to bring something to the table, and both of our opinions are important to the final product. So so it's probably been the easiest and most fun stuff we've done together. Um, but yeah, we've been involved with each other's work since day one.
Hmm.
Like my first forays into scratching as like a prepubescent teen were in my parents' basement, and my brother was the first person to see that and to actually tell me that this was worthwhile pursuing. It was Dave who said, how the hell did you just do that? I can't do that. This is kind of crazy. I
Right.
think you should come home after school and practice for a couple hours every day because you're really good at this, and let's like hone in on this. And he wasn't a DJ, he was a guitar player, but
Right.
he had a musical ear.
Right.
And I would play him shit that I was practicing when I was a kid, you know, every week or two, like, hey, here's my progress, or hey, I just figured out this scratch. How do you think this sounds?
Right.
And even though he couldn't scratch himself, he could still tell if something sounded right or not, or if something sounded impressive.
Right.
And in fact, when you're DJing, you're trying to impress the people in the crowd who also aren't scratch DJs. So his ear was exactly the ear of the person in the crowd that I'm trying to get to.
Right.
So he'd be like, I don't really like that one. It's sloppy. And sometimes I remember as a kid, I'd be like, oh, but it's super tough, and I can't believe that I can actually do it. What do you mean?
Right.
And he'd be like, yeah, but it doesn't sound right. Clean it up,
Right.
you know? And then I would figure out a way to clean it up, and then he'd be like, that sounds dope, you know? So that was the beginnings. So he's always kind of been, coach for my DJ shit.
Right.
And, Chromeo started, a lot of people don't know the backstory of Chromeo. As the thing that happened before Chromeo is that Dave was making hip hop beats for like local Montreal
Okay.
rap groups.
Yeah.
When I was doing DMCs and that kind of stuff, Dave had a Akai S950 sampler, and he was making beats that sounded like High Tech and, Large Professor and whatever we were listening to, And so he was making rap beats, and I was scratching, and that was like the teenage Maklovich basement. But also listening to sort of like, those were the years of acid jazz and shit like that, which I'll get back to in a sec for this project.
Right.
Because he was also playing in a band that was sort of like the Montreal version of Jamiroquai. And P-Thug was the bass player, but there was other people in the band too. So he gets into making rap beats, puts down the guitar for a couple of years. And then a few years later, him and his friends opened a record shop in Montreal. And Dave was the sort of like store manager / buyer. He'd be contacting the distributors and saying like, hey, send me 5 copies of this fucking Outsiders record and 3 copies of Fatal Hussein or whatever. And at one point, this record shop, Science was the name of this shop in Montreal, they moved in with a house and techno record shop that was owned by Tiga. So Tiga had the techno record store. Dave and his friends had the hip hop record store, and they move into the same space. And literally, there's one wall that's hip hop and one wall that's like techno, house, jungle, whatever else. And so Tiga, who's a few years older than my bro, got to know Dave, and he would sometimes hear Dave's rap beats because we would press our own records at the time. We had a label called Audio Research.
Right.
So Tiga always liked my brother's rap beats, even though he didn't listen to rap. He'd be like, it's kind of like had his eyes on him. And at one point, Tiga told Dave, I think, and he knew that Dave could play instruments and shit. He's like, I think you should make a project for Turbo, for my label Turbo, but like not hip hop, just whatever else you want to do. Like you'd like, as in like go and fly, go and flap your wings.
Spread your,
on some like, I know you have it in you to do something else than these rap beats. Whatever you want to do, we should sign it to Turbo. And
wow.
Dave was like, okay, well, can I bring in my friend P, who was just his best friend at the time and who they used to play in a band in together when they were younger.
Right.
And that was how Chromeo came about. And Dave never used to sing. So I remember when they started making demos, and there was one song where he sang, and me and P were like, whoa, that's weird. Like, we just weren't used to his voice.
Okay.
So even that was like very different because we were just not on that tip before that, but he was just like, let me try and sing on this one joint.
He wasn't singing in the house when you were like scratching. He hadn't.
No. He just sort of tried it, and then that eventually became Chromeo, and then they signed to other labels too, and every, a lot of stuff. This was like 2002 or 3, like way before people heard of them.
Right.
So, but I was always just like the third person in the room listening to their demos and saying, I like this one better than that one, and that kind of shit. And then a few years later, when I started producing and messing around with remixes, they've had a lot of experience using samplers and sequencers and doing that kind of shit. So I was like, a lot of us are just DJs who at one point, open up some sort of DAW and start trying shit out. But I had already I used to just like sit and watch him make beats. So I knew what it meant to truncate a sample or to tune something up or down or that kind of shit, or to EQ you know, so that this instrument doesn't compete with that instrument, like just that kind of shit.
Yeah.
Um, and so I kind of went at it with that knowledge already, and then again I would sort of play him stuff because he was already a producer. I'd be like, oh well, here's a demo of some label asked me to do a remix. What do you think? And I'd be like, well, this part's cool, but this part sucks. And I'd be like, all right, go back and work on it. So we've always helped each other out with our shit. Um, and as Chromeo started, like at first they were a band, so they weren't in the electronic scene at all. But somehow through the sort of Hype Machine and MySpace years, they got welcomed into the electronic scene.
Right.
And I got more involved with the band then too, because I would get people to remix them.
Right.
So then I'd be like, oh, Yuksek, here, why don't you do a remix for Chromeo for my brother's band? Or like, hey, you know, Laid Back Luke, why don't you do a remix for my brother's band? So I started connecting a lot of dots. So we've always had that role with each other's shit. We just and I scratched on Needy Girl on the first Chromeo single,
Right.
and so like you know we've done stuff with each other. There's my Sebastien Tellier remix. They've really helped me with the string parts. So I don't know how to fucking get it. Like I hired a string section for the Sebastien Tellier remix.
Wow.
And sent an invoice to the label. They didn't know they were paying for an orchestra. But I remember like Dave, when I was messing around with that idea, Dave grabbed a mic and sort of like hummed a sort of guide part for what the strings should do.
Right.
Because he's way more a musician than I am. So he'd be like, oh well, okay, you want like Patrice Rushen type of strings? All right, here, hit record. And then go and just kind of sing some shit. And then I could go to the string section and be like, well, I have this guide here. You know, can we do something like that? So we've really helped each other out with a lot of our shit.
Right.
So for years and years, people would be like, oh, well, you guys are brothers? Whoa, that's crazy. Why don't you, when are you going to collab?
Right.
And we were we couldn't even see that we weren't actually doing that yet because we felt like we'd been doing that since we were kids.
Right.
We've always done everything together, but some of it would be called A-Trak and some of it would be called Chromeo and some of it would be called something else. And then over the years, we would do DJ sets as the Brothers Maklovich. But finally last year, we were like, we should probably make these records, like actually make something as the two of us.
So you call in Raphael Sadiq to just like cut a record?
Yeah, we call it Raphael Sadiq. It's a trip. I had just met him. But yeah, it finally came together this past year, and when we were thinking about like, because like I was saying earlier, for me it's really important that each thing I do has a very defined sound. So we had to figure out what the vision was before we even made the records, and we just felt like going back to when we were first going to record shops in Montreal in like 96, 97. When we would go to buy a hip hop record, but we would still hear a Masters at Work thing that had just come out. Or maybe we were listening to like shit that's like Giant Step and Talking Loud and those kinds of labels. So it's very, you know, soulful, deep, jazzy kind of vibes. That band Incognito, shit like that. Like that's what we were listening to in 96. So we went to that kind of headspace, and then at least that was like a starting point. But then you know how it is, like you might have a reference when you start a track, but when you actually make it, it comes out a little different. But that was the vision for those records. And actually the second single comes out next week.
The one, is it not the third? Because the 11 Kelly's already...
Well, so the Sadiq joint was just a remix.
Oh, right, of course. Yeah.
Sadiq was a remix. And then, yeah, Give Love to Get Some was the first official single. Second single comes out next week.
Yeah, 11 Kelly's a beast. I like that.
Yeah, he's super dope. Sorry, one sec.
Yeah. Thanks to the Raid, Jam, and the Cheers, Mimi, and Bluff. Yeah, I don't know how to control those alert sounds. What was it like? So growing up, I mean, Montreal to me, growing up on the West Coast, has always held this mythical status. My favorite author, one of my favorite authors is Mordecai Richler, and just like and then going there and reading about Outremont and going out there.
I grew up in that neighborhood. I grew up like Because doesn't Duddy Kravitz go to Walensky's? Like that was down the street from
Yeah.
from where I grew up. Like
Yeah.
literally walking distance from my parents' house.
Oh wow. Okay. So
Yeah.
that's he just writing about your hood
Yes.
all the time.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's always been this very cosmopolitan, or always in my mind, this been this cosmopolitan city, very worldly, which explains a lot of how you guys have evolved along your path. Did you go, like, were there just a lot of shows coming through town that you guys were always at? Or, I mean, you were practicing and touring so much, but even the after hours scene from like Stereo, Aria, and like all the electronic culture that was there, were you guys sort of a part of that or following it at all?
Yeah, and it's like I'm still not done grasping how crazy the range that we were exposed to was. Like now there's this guy that has an Instagram account called the Flyer Vault 514
Mm-hmm.
who's been posting old flyers from Montreal and like the raves that I played when I was a teenager. And it's so crazy to watch to just check out those lineups and be like, man, like anybody could just go to a show and see all this.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like the era when raves would have like Carl Craig and the Beatnuts, you know, like literally Carl Craig, the Beatnuts, fucking DJ Sneak,
Right.
A-Trak and Qbert, and like some local hip hop group, and like Marco Corolla.
Wow.
And you're like, whoa! Like people could see all that in one night,
Yeah.
but that's really how Montreal was. It's a trip, and like I used to think that it was a cliche when people would say, "Oh, Montreal, it's like America meets Europe." I used to be like, "Yeah, whatever, get over it." Like, okay, we speak French, whatever.
Right.
But now that I'm like thinking back at the art and music that came through the city, it really was like as far as exposure, we got a lot of shit in Montreal that wasn't really getting to the rest of North America. Yeah, we were kind of spoiled with the music that came through to the city.
And so when
Most
you
you can go out when you're 18, which
Right.
means people go out when they're 17,
right.
and you're just kind of exposed to more with that.
Right, yeah. It just seemed like there was culture spilling out of every nook and cranny when I first went,
Yeah.
and been lucky enough to go back. And on that note, I didn't know that they hailed from Montreal, but you scratched. I don't know if that was your first one, but
Brand
Montreal
Van?
band with Brand Van 3000 drinking in LA, which is a huge classic.
Yeah, that was a trip. That was just like local scene shit, you know? James DeSalvio was a video director, and like him and his brothers had a couple of venues in the city. So I didn't know him directly, but I don't remember if it was Willow or one of the, like just a few of the people that were just doing shit in Montreal. Someone was like, "Oh, Alain, this guy James wants to meet you." And then that guy was like, "Hey man, what you do is really cool. I have a band. Can you scratch like at the beginning of our video?" And I was drinking in LA. Like it was just that simple. Like my mom came with me to the shoot.
Right.
I was 14 years old, and then now everybody knows the song.
Right. You were 14 and you just laid down some memorable, like, they'll be
I
playing.
scratched on Super Duck Breaks, the scratch record that every DJ had. Because for me, it was just like what I would be doing in my basement that day, anyways. But it was perfect.
Right. Just going through the routine.
Yeah.
While we're on this tip, we got a question from JM. Where's the best poutine now these days?
Are we saying within Montreal or in
Yeah,
general?
I think so. Yeah, within Montreal.
I mean, I left
Not in
Montreal in
LA.
2006. I couldn't tell you where to get it in the city. I'm just gonna say that anything that's outside of the province of Quebec is probably boo boo.
Right. Yeah, no, it doesn't exist in Vancouver. I don't know if
Yeah.
it exists here in LA.
There's a few spots, like in New York, there's a couple places that have it, but it's too salty and like the cheese curds are not the same outside of Quebec. I don't know what it is. There's like something about cheese in Canada.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you ever?
I mean, dairy is kind of gross in America anyway, so I'm sure that's part of it. My personal theory of why poutine is bad in the U.S. is the cheese.
Yeah. Once again, the cheese game on the West Coast and on the West Coast in Canada, there wasn't much, and it wasn't until I got to travel a little bit more and go to, I don't know, Paris.
Another thing that's a trip to think back about growing up in Quebec is like, in Quebec there's like monasteries. Like there's monks that made cheese,
Right.
and I hadn't really.
It's a
I remember thinking
calling.
about that recently. Like just in general, like the the church was like so present in Canada. Like I'm Jewish. I'm not Christian, and still you felt it everywhere. It's like something about Quebec in particular where like Christianity was like super powerful and all over the place.
Right.
Um, but yeah, that's another thing. But shout out to monasteries and the monk cheeses.
Fromageries made, yeah, run by the priesthood. I was always curious how you managed to sort of first make that jump from, you're doing the hip hop stuff and what your
Yeah,
first sort of influences were in the electronic world, because it seemed like you pivoted like, pretty quickly from being on tour playing, I don't know, arenas and doing one sound, and then Fool's Gold, like you guys were just shot out of a rocket with those releases, the Kid Sister and the early days.
yeah. It might have seemed quick, but there was definitely a few years of figuring out the sound and planting the seeds and just putting in the foundations for some sort of change. And to me, a lot of it started with Serato becoming a part of my DJing. In 2003, I think.
Okay.
That was the first endorsee with Serato, so I had it early. And moving to a digital library just made my record selection as a DJ broaden a lot.
Yeah.
So I was always interested in different sounds of music, but I just used to only play hip hop. And then, around 2003 or so, I started experimenting more with different genres, and there was just kind of like an eclecticism thing that was starting around then, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And I would go to New York and visit Dave there, and there was really cool parties at like Tribeca Grand and APT and some of these venues, and I was just listening to, Stretch and some of these DJs playing really cool eclectic sets, and I would go home and be like, all right, I need to like broaden my horizons,
Hmm.
um, and so I started messing around with different sounds and types of music around those years, and this was also the sort of the mashup era. So fucking around with blends and mashups, and
Right.
again, doing things digitally just opened a lot of possibilities, And
Got it.
then while I was touring with Kanye, a lot of the visibility was on that, but on my end, I was still experimenting, and I would learn how to produce remixes and sort of up tempo production, and what ended up being Dirty South Dance and those kinds of things and edits and Baltimore Club and that kind of shit, and that you know that was still kind of a departure from my background of a turntablist and you know battle DJ, which was a community that was still only in boom bap, you know. So I was messing around with different sounds for a little while, and by the time we launched Fool's Gold, I just think that it was probably hitting critical mass. But there was already 2 3 years of experimenting that led to that.
How did you link up with Nick initially? And
I met Nick sort of around the same time that I met Roxy Cottontail and the guys from the Rub, Ayers and Cosmo and 11. That was all kind of a similar scene in New York. So I was coming to hang out in New York more and more by like maybe 2005 or so.
Mhm.
And I remember going to the Rub, to that party, and just again being really excited to find other DJs who were playing like hip hop DJs in terms of like quick mixing
Hmm.
and the sort of the lens of hip hop, but hitting a bunch of different genres and different tempos. So I felt like I was meeting kindred spirits.
Right.
Um, and Roxy Contel was a promoter in New York who was just putting on really interesting shows and pairing people up and just kind of she was a catalyst to a lot of cool shit. Um, and I met Dust the Rock through her. He was designing a bunch of her flyers, and I met Nick just kind of in that same sort of circle. It was even before I actually moved to New York. I moved to New York probably the next summer, but I was still coming to New York a lot. It's easy to get there from Montreal, and I would just check in with that crew and go play their parties and and I would just literally tell them like pay me whatever like the. I remember hitting some of those people and be like, "Can I, can I play next time I'm in town?" And they'd be like, "I can't afford you." Like
Mm.
Roxy always tells this story that she had just seen me with Kanye at Madison Square Garden, and
Right.
I was like, yeah, "Roxy, I want to play your parties," and she's like, "I can't afford you. You're at the Garden." And I'd be like, "Just pay me whatever you want. Like I just think what you do is cool,
Right.
And then she'd pay me like I don't know, $300,
Right.
and I would just get to play the records that I felt like playing and have fun.
Right.
And like so many of the seeds were planted through that. And then Nick and I ended up founding Fool's Gold because I, through those same kinds of connections, I met Kid Sister and Flostradamus in Chicago, and then I would go to Chicago for gigs, and we'd actually meet up in person and like exchange records, and just kind of like talk about cool ideas. And next thing you know, I'm producing some of the Kid Sister stuff,
Hmm.
and Triple Exchange was doing a lot of those records too, and then he was doing Spank Rock, so everybody was just had their little projects.
Right.
And there was a couple of records that I wanted to put out, and Audio Research, my older, back hip hop label, still technically existed, but it felt like it would be hard to sort of jump into this current sound
Hmm.
when we were mostly known for underground hip hop.
Yeah.
So by then, Nick and I were just like talking all the time, exchanging music. Shout out to iChat, sending MP3s to each other, and you know what I mean, like just putting each other on to like, yo, have you heard this? Have you heard that?
Right.
Man, wouldn't it be ill if this artist worked with that producer? That kind of shit, which are just sort of like fantasy label conversations.
Right.
But eventually, we just decided to start our own thing.
Yeah. Here, what 450 releases later or something, if the
Yeah,
source
something.
is accurate. What are you excited about lately? Music wise, artists, guys that you've signed, maybe.
Yeah, there's a bunch of shit that we've signed that I'm super psyched about. Some of which is not announced yet, but yeah, on the Fool's Gold side, I mean, I'm super excited about DJ Swisha, whose EP we just recently put out, and High Classified finished his next EP that's coming out next month, and that's really dope. And he's been working on that for like a few years.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Crack is a really dope rapper from Chicago who's wrapping up his album for us, and then yeah, a couple of new things even. Um, so yeah, it's the label's in a fun place now where I think like the music industry went through so many changes in the last couple of years, and it feels like it's back to a place where we could just experiment and have fun and not feel like we have to partake into something that everyone is doing. Those I'm more fond of the periods like now where you could just throw shit at the wall and see what sticks.
Right.
I don't like the eras where everyone feels like you have to do something that fits into this format or that playlist, or you know what I mean. Like I'm not into that.
I will say that I do love, while going through promos, mail out promos is usually not people's favorite thing to do. I love just opening something new that comes out from you guys, someone I
Nice.
haven't heard of before, and
Yeah.
even if the first record or second record is surprising or something that like I'm like, well, I have to check every single one on here because like I don't know what it's clear.
Cool.
Yeah, so I get that. How does this current bringing it back to the landscape that we're currently in?
Mhm.
How does everything that's sort of happened this year, as someone that runs a label, as a touring artist, how does that affect like your outlook and your strategy and like your approach to releasing music and the advice you pass on to your artists?
As far as just the COVID and everything that's happened this year,
Sure, yeah, just like that, exactly.
um, I mean, anybody that's making music, as in people who do more than just tour in music, is already in a pretty good position. Even though like nothing's easy for anyone this year, but
Right.
like if you're able to put music out, at least that's something that can replace some of the touring. But I've been telling a lot of my friends to experiment a lot and to it's kind of a good time to fail also because who cares? You could just try something else right after and
Yeah.
sort of dust yourself off and try other shit. But again, there's no like if a friend sends me a demo that sounds like a sort of formulaic club record, I'm just like, what club are we talking about here? Like that's not this there's no use in
Hypothetical
just
place.
making like tools right now.
Right.
It's more about putting more thought and care and intention into things. So I think it's a good time to reevaluate and um, yeah, just it's been an interesting year just in general to stop and think twice about why we even do a lot of what we do.
Hmm.
And I think that can apply to making music. And it's definitely financially a challenging year for a lot of people. But beyond that, it's a good time to be fearless and try things and yeah, to just put a little bit more intentionality behind what we're doing.
Speaking of trying things, I was just playing. We were playing your defected set with
Oh
the
yeah,
drum machine
yeah.
that you have unveiled this year, and like how first off, how are you finding that? Is it changing your approach? I imagine it must change your approach to your sets, but also, I mean, you're talking about Serato being. It sounds like you're on the beta of like the SL Box like one.
Hmm.
Yeah, what are you seeing in technology like that is exciting you, inspiring you besides drum machines and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, the material that I've been coming up with this year with the TR8S has been really fun because it allows me to make routines that are that I can stretch out as much as I want and that people can really listen to as songs, even though I'm performing them live.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it helps me bring turntablism into just a sort of listener friendly environment. Um, and in general, I find that in the last couple of years, there's been so many like gadget innovations, technological information innovations that is giving a lot of DJs new arsenal to experiment with. So it's I feel like we're in a period of um, um, of innovation for DJ tricks and techniques in large part because there's all these new gadgets that are on the market and people can just try shit out and include some new thing with some other thing they already had and
Right.
combine shit. So it's fun to have toys.
I mean, speaking of which, it sounds like that requires a whole new set of updated rules every year for the Goldie Awards
I
or
mean, the Goldie
contests.
Awards rule in general is use whatever you want, impress us.
Right.
Like that's the main thing is like, yeah, it doesn't have to be two Techniques turntables and a two-channel mixer. It's like, no, as long as there's a deck somewhere in there of some form,
Right.
and then whatever bells and whistles you want to include, like we need to push the art forward. So let's just like see what people come up with, and may the best person win.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of looking at it in production as well. Making music, there's something to be said for. I mean, you must get this question all the time. Are you still playing vinyl? Are you going to give us a vinyl set? When was the last time? All that stuff. Uh, Greg Wilson still famously tours with his reel-to-reel set, and that was
I
one
just
of my.
had lunch with him an hour ago.
Really? I didn't. Yeah, that's so random. I
No,
guess,
sorry, I had lunch with Craig Williams. My bad. Who's Craig Wilson?
Greg Wilson. He was. I mean, he's from that era. One of the first.
Oh, he's the OG. Okay.
OG.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought you meant Australian Craig Williams.
Yeah. No,
Um,
he's like.
okay, so someone tours with a reel to reel. I,
Yeah.
I don't I don't play vinyl sets. Vinyl's stupid. Like everybody thinks that I'm like Mr. Scratch purist. Vinyl's great at
Half
the
the
house.
chat just left.
Yeah, sorry guys.
It's all-
No, vinyl is beautiful and romantic, but like don't tour with that shit. Vinyl's great for playing at your favorite local spot down the
Mm.
street, and you can pull out deep cuts and have fun with that. Cool. I'll go and hang out and listen. I love that
I
shit.
love. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
don't get on the plane with that.
Right.
Just do it for the love of those rare pressings that you have. That's awesome. I love the way a vinyl collection looks on someone's walls.
Right.
Vinyl is, great furniture. It looks good.
Yeah.
And of course there's a ton of shit that's not digitized, so you can find all these deep cuts and samples, but most of my collection is still in Montreal. I left Montreal in 2006. I don't even know where most of my records are.
Right.
Literally, like maybe next year I'll get the rest of my collection here.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean sevens and tens are great. I remember I had the two flight cases and I had to walk into like a crowded bar and just hit someone in the leg and knee it, they'd fall over. I'd be like, sorry man, these are I don't have the muscle mass
Yeah.
yet to manipulate these crates. Yeah, no, it's definitely changed a lot. I know that you don't have too much
Yeah.
time here, so we'll get to a couple demos in a
Cool.
sec. Yeah, I think I covered. Where do you stand on like I know we talked a little bit about sampling duck sauce. I mean, as someone that also runs a label and you talked about clearances, describe your position on sampling in 2020. Like as a, for a new artist, it's like I really want to clear this, or like how do you feel about the game?
It's the bane of my life. I sample so much, and it takes. I mean, I got a record coming out in a few weeks that we've been trying to clear since January, and it's still not fully cleared, and it comes out in a few weeks. It's so fucking arduous. Sample clearance laws are old, and it's literally lawless. It's just whatever. You got to track someone down. You got to be a fucking private eye
Right.
and find whoever owns the rights to the song.
Right.
Half the time, there's different parties that each tell you they own the rights, and they're saying, "Don't listen to that guy. He's a liar. Don't listen to him. He's a drug addict." No, no, no. He forgets that he sold his publishing to me in 1982.
Right.
It's all shit like that, and you don't know who to listen to, and it's insane. But I love to sample. So the only thing I'll say, there's a few things I'll say. I mean, sample replays are obviously a workaround
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of those problems, because when you replay a sample, for those who might not know, sample clearances have two sides to it. You got to clear the master and the publishing. When you replay a sample, you're no longer using the master. So you just clear the publishing. Or if you want, you can do a replay that's a little different, and then you don't even clear the publishing, because then it's not even the same composition. But in any case, it's a workaround that tends to be less expensive too, because the master side tends to be the more expensive part of the clearance.
Right.
I used to dread getting sample clearances, because so much of sampling is the sort of magic that is captured in the feeling of a record. It might be like accidental bits that are part of a chop that you take. You're sampling a piece of a guitar part, but you still hear the tail end of the reverb that was on the keyboard on the previous bar.
Right.
And that, the way you chop it, has a feeling like that's what's great with sampling, is catching these little artifacts.
Right.
It's really hard to recreate that with a replay. But in recent months, I've actually had a lot of luck with replays, and a few songs where I got replays, I ended up being able to get a better sound in the end from having full control. So I'm more open to replays than I used to be. I used to really kick and scream against them until I really had to. So that's one thing where, like, it's good to know that people are getting better and better at making the replays.
Right.
But then there's also the question that where there's no real answer is who really needs to clear. Like, when do you know if you need to clear a sample, or when to roll the dice? And there's no such thing as a straight answer to that, because pragmatically all that means is you can put a record out that has an uncleared sample. We've all done it. Mm-hmm. What's an educated guess to see if you're going to get caught and sued? And I've been sued, and it sucks. Getting sued is not fun, and it's expensive, and litigation lawyers are expensive, and it's not cool. So there's this sort of like below the radar mentality, depending on what label you're releasing through, and depending on your own profile. And by the way, there's a ton of rap records that come out that still have uncleared samples. A lot of this sort of Griselda type shit, some of their producers make fake samples, but some of it's samples that just aren't cleared, and they're just like, fuck it, come find me.
Right.
That's the other thing. It's like that. There's a personal decision there of like, how do you, how much risk are you willing to take?
Yeah. How do you want to
Um,
run your business? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Because some people just don't care if they get sued. They're just like, oh, come find me. I don't care. I can't really operate like that. Kind of wish I could.
Right. You're not under the radar anymore. Haven't
Yeah.
been for a while. Yeah, no, I think you covered all the bases with that. Before we get to a couple of these demos and let you go, we've got a little speed round. You just, first thing off the top of your head. We're here with A-Trak, Fone a Friend Friday. All right, you good to go?
Yep.
What is your most slept on? I know you like to cook, so the slept on Moroccan secret in the kitchen.
Just put cumin in everything.
Secret, okay. Dropped it in some chili yesterday. If you were not able to have a career in music, what would you be doing?
I mean, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a pediatrician at one point, and but I studied
Cool.
physics. I went to McGill University in physics, so I don't know. Something kind of scientific, probably, because that I have that kind of mind, but I'm not
Physics.
sure. Although nowadays it's like there's so much social activism that's important to me too. So
Right.
hard to tell. One of those buckets.
Lofty goals. What is your most memorable collab and one dream collab of anyone in human history for the Dream Collab?
Most memorable collab. I mean, Duck Sauce is still the most fun chemistry. I
Right.
think, even though it's still going. Dream collab.
Any era?
Either Jeff Mills or Shuggy Otis.
Jeff Mills. Cool. Sure. I mean, two different names. I like it.
Yeah.
Great. And the last question of the speed round. So your first, or one of your first records on, I believe, Stone's Throw, is titled Enter Ralph Wiggum.
Yes.
Are you, I guess that must mean you're a Simpsons buff or
Yes,
were?
for sure.
What's
For
your favorite episode?
Man. Monorail, probably.
I was thinking that as I
Monorail,
Just a beat.
or the one where Homer stops going to church. And then
sleeper one, yeah.
and like his house burns down. That one was really good. But yeah, I'm fond of like sort of season 4 Conan era.
Right.
Yeah.
I
I haven't watched the last like 10 plus years of The Simpsons.
Of course.
But, like the first 15 or so was, holy to me.
Right. I've been having this recurring conversation where I'm kind of like not the biggest fan of musicals, but I've been trying to explain to everyone that it's because I don't usually understand the lyrics, or I just don't find it great. But in this context, like at the Monorail, I don't know if it's Phil Hartman's delivery. It's just perfect, like
Yeah.
in the song.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for the speed round. All right. Shall we get to a couple of these before we let you go?
Sure.
Well,
Yeah.
it's dealer's choice here. I know we've got that list there. Why don't you because you've got to queue yours up as well.
Yes.
Pick one at random and we'll throw it in the.
Okay, so just among the stuff that you
Yeah,
sent me,
yeah, exactly.
choose. Okay, and how many do we want to do? Like 3, 4 or something? Or-
Yeah, we can sort of needle drop. Well, I guess because you're gonna listen on your end. Yeah, just until you got to bounce. I'm gonna keep trucking
You're
through
gonna
the rest
keep
of
going
them.
through all of them?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I remember we can even start with that first one,
Okay,
Rhino.
let's do that. I think I've got.
I remember the first one and the last one kind of stood out to me, and then
Sure.
yeah, let's start with that first one, Rhino.
All right. So we got Rhino.
I should listen again, right? So you're gonna play it.
Yeah,
on there?
we'll do a 3, 2, 1. It's the fun high tech part
Oh,
of,
okay.
of this pod or whatever. So I'm good to go here. This is
I'm
Rhino.
gonna mute myself while you're playing, right?
Sounds good. 3, 2, 1, go. pause this one there because I think we get.
What's up?
I think we get the idea. So I'm gonna
Yeah,
pause
yeah.
that one there, so we can listen to a little bit more. Want you lead things off? Any thoughts?
I like this one a lot. I like this one a lot. I don't even have much feedback on it. I love the groove of it. Like as a DJ, the first thing I tend to listen to is sort of the drums and bass line and like how the pocket sits.
Yeah.
I really like how the drums and the bass sound and feel. Um, I think this kind of like boogie sound, a lot of people try to emulate or do it, but it's hard to really get it right. And I think Rhino just got the groove right. Um, it's just a groove, like you can't. And once you have that groove, it's kind of hard to go wrong. So
Right.
then there's other elements that come in, the little guitar, the little synth flourishes. The Once the groove is good, like you could play an fucking accordion over this, and I would still be like, yeah, sure, grooves. So I like it. So and even just mix down wise, I'm in my studio here. It sounds good to me.
Yeah. I'm with you on all points. Yeah, we're in the pocket. The group is someone. Dash is asking what that means. I mean, to me, that means that you can just listen to it forever on a loop, and it just feels good. It just there's
Are they
not-
asking what a pocket means?
Yeah, like how the pocket sits, like what that means. I guess it's how would
It's
you
the je
describe
ne
it?
sais quoi of a groove.
There's
the
a lot of
pocket-
Americans in the
'cause
chat.
think
They're
about
not
it
going to
like
know
this.
what that means.
Here's one quick thought. For if someone doesn't know what pocket means, here's a quick thought. Get 3 drummers and tell them to play the same drum pattern. They're all going to feel differently.
Hmm.
And it's not even about whether you're hitting hard or soft. It's about the little ghost notes between the notes. It's about the swing. It's about everything about the performance that makes one groove different from another. That's the pocket. And then when there's other elements that get added to it, with groove, there's a lot of subtlety where sometimes if something is a little bit late, it might feel more groovy. If something is rushed, it tends to sound less good.
Mhm.
If something is exactly on, it's just not as sexy. There's a swagger in music, and that's the pocket. And I obsess with it. It's all I care about. It's the only, like I'm unable to like something that doesn't have the good pocket. And I will like certain records that might be uninteresting to a lot of other people just because of their pocket.
I love it. That's a great definition. Someone saying pocket means Jay Dilla. I mean, it doesn't have to be that massive of a.
That's what I mean. He was
swing.
he was one of the masters of the pocket, but
Right.
I think some people sort of take that idea too far. Where like, JD was one of the first people to really not quantize their drums. Although you know what, we got to give a shout out to a lot of the West Coast producers like Battle Cat and Fred Wreck and them because they were doing the offbeat claps and shit like that for a long time too.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one type of pocket, and Dilla might have been like the king of it. But there's a lot of other types of pockets.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that's fascinating with that kind of shit is like, if you program the same drum beat in a limb drum and in a MPC and in an SP, something about the circuitry of those old machines, they're not going to have the same groove.
Right.
Everything in a limb has some sort of magic. Or here's an even better thing: sample the limb drum's sounds. Program a drum pattern in your DAW.
Right.
Make that same pattern on the machine. It's not going to groove the same way.
Right.
And that's the shit that we all nerd out over. And I don't even own drum machines. I'm in the box, but I still acknowledge it.
Yeah. No, it's a feeling. I was trying to reprogram as an exercise the drums from Tellier Lavre. I'm gonna butcher this. Lavre Tournelle.
Oh yeah, Ritornelli, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. And then Scratch Bastard happened to post the drum track, and he was like, "Oh yeah, this is Tony Allen's like one-shot take," and I was like,
Crazy, right?
"That explains why I don't have a hope in hell of getting." And then
Because it's Tony Allen, yeah.
yeah, Tony Allen. He just did it like he did one shot and then had to run off to pick up his kid from school. Was the anecdote.
dope.
So
Yeah.
that's the pocket.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep it moving here.
I was thinking we could listen to well, I don't know how to say this name, but Euphony.
Euphony, yeah. Let me bring that one up
Partly
real quick.
because that one was different from a lot of the like. I by the way, I really enjoyed going through the links you sent me where
Mhm.
like everything was funky.
Mhm.
I like that you have a funky community. Um, but yeah, this track was a little different. It was funky, but it wasn't like just a boogie track, and I thought it'd be cool to check it out.
All right, let's do it.
Cool.
You funny. I'm just loading mine. My
I
end.
like that his thing says mix down 1978345.
Yeah.
That's how I work.
Naming conventions for
Yeah.
life. All right, 3, 2, 1. Let's go.
Okay.
Cool. I think we'll pause that one there. That's you funny
Cool.
in the mix. I like that one too. Good choice.
Yeah, I thought that was cool. I really on I don't know if people at home are listening to on their laptops or on bigger speakers, but I really like the mix of the bass on there. Like where the bass is sitting, mix down wise, I know how that will sound in the club, and that is quite groovy, and it's hard to get the bass to sit right where it is there. So I know the name of the track says mix down 1 bajillion, but I guess it's worth the effort because that the low end is kind of the toughest thing to mix, and I like how it's sounding. Um, it's funny because this to me makes me think of um, a little bit. It's like a little more slick of a production style in the world of dance music. Like it's a little bit more in like beatport territory.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit more of like the late night terrace, than the funk bar or whatever. Like
Mm-hmm.
we're venturing into V-neck territory a little bit here, but I like when those records are funky.
Right.
It makes me think of like sometimes like labels like Anjuna Deep will have
Sure.
like really groovy records, and I'm like, oh cool, this is. I don't always check for progressive house, and when I find the funky joints, it's like rewarding.
Right.
Kind of makes me think of like Marcus Marr kind of producers too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my I have one note which is maybe I'm just kind of like sharing something that I've been doing in like that I've been removing from tracks lately myself too. Is just like there's a couple of like build up sections in here and like risers and snare builds and stuff, and like I know for myself I've been like doing as little of that in my tracks for the last 2 years or so, 2 3 years,
Right.
and there's something very liberating about no longer doing like the slick dance build up.
Yeah.
So this track, I don't think it really needs as many of the
Yeah.
because you don't have a drop. So like I don't know. It's to me that's a bit of a for a lot of dance producers that's a habit, and you end up thinking that you just have to put that in every track.
Right.
I don't think it's as needed, but I like um, I like the sort of clean groove of this.
I had that note too. I thought that literally that riser, and then there was another sound, both in that one build up, that they seemed a little out of place considering how interesting, like melodically. s Often when you have that many like ideas and different motifs going on, it's kind of tough to keep the track, well mixed, but it sounded
Yeah.
good, and you didn't, and it's like it's subtle and in a beautiful way, and I think, I mean, you can build tension in different ways. We've talked about that a little bit, like whether that's getting creative with simpler or whatever, but not just reaching for. Sometimes it's like placeholder stuff. You grab it, stick it in there, and you're like, I'm gonna switch this out later, and then
And then it just
Then you
it stays there.
yeah, and it just stays there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice track, you funny. How you doing for time here?
Want to do one more?
Sure.
I remember that on the Dr. Plechter track, there's a photo with Fool's Gold and A-Track logos. So
Yeah.
imagine.
Tailored. Let's do that one then.
Yeah, let's give a shout out
All
to the extra effort here.
Extra effort in presentation.
Appreciate it. Yeah, yeah. Which was like if I remember correctly, there was like many tracks.
Yeah, it's
stuck
like
together. We don't have
five
to-
1
yeah,
minute things going on.
Exactly. I
Uh,
mean, you tell me how many of them you wanna like
Yeah.
when you wanna stop it. Because I remember having like some notes on the sound of this too. So let's go through like however long you want. Tell me when to pause it. and
Sure.
give her-
Let me just load that up real quick.
Yeah.
We got Dr. Plechter with. All right, 3, 2, 1.
Number 1.
Two.
Number 3. Number 4. Number 5.
Cool. Dr. Plechter with the 5 demos.
Dr. Plecker was like, I'm gonna get your attention.
What do you think? Any favorites?
I have some positive, but also some constructive criticism.
That's why we're
feedback
here.
as well. I mean, you know, first things first. Dr. Plechter clearly is very talented, and what impressed me the most was just I would say the chords, like the chord writing, the chord voicing, you know,
Mhm.
Especially in that second joint. That was like some serious mode type of, you know, really interesting inversions and shit that I don't even really know how to play that stuff myself. So that impresses me always.
Right.
Very jazzy chords and interesting voicings. Um, my criticism is the following. Um, Sonically, there's not much that was surprising to me. And I think production, more than anything, is all about choices. And it's about making, you know, interesting choices. So this is all a palette that I like. I like this kind of music. And the writing is really good and the programming is on point. But there was nothing that made me say, "Oh, I can't believe that you put this kind of clap with this track," or like, "Oh, that's an interesting percussion. I should try that." The tracks that grab my attention bring out this kind of reaction for me.
Right.
I like listening to a song that makes me think, "Oh man, I should try this kind of percussion," or "Ooh, I should try this kind of bass line with those kinds of chords." There's nothing here that made me think, "I never thought of that." And it's not about, I'm not saying I myself, but like, or rather, I've never heard this. You know, there's a lot of stuff that sits in that sort of like Oliver meets Sebastian era Bloghouse meets Serious
A
Mode
little bit
stuff.
of
And
breakbot.
I love
Yeah.
all those kinds of records, but what's the new thing that's added here? To me, the new, if anything, it's in the writing. It's in the chords. The musicality is super dope.
Mhm.
But I think on a production level, it would be cool to hear more surprising choices. Like sometimes I'll be working on a track and I'll just think, is there like, what's a clap that I could choose that will make someone else think I want to clap like that record? You know,
Right.
like interesting snares. Like that's a thing. Um, and even as far as the sort of lo-fi sound of the whole thing, um, which is, you know, there's an Oliver influence there too with the sort of like track one kind of thing,
Mhm.
and the tape hiss and the static. That stuff is cool, but it's also a crutch, to be really honest. Like it's like Instagram filters or VSCO filters. Like making something sound lo-fi
Mm.
is fun, but you put a filter on any photo and it'll look cool and vibey too. And it's, to me, there's something more daring in trying to create those textures you know, in more surprising ways than just slapping tape hits over something.
Hmm.
You know, and I'm not trying to diss Dr. Plecter. Super talented. I like it, but I'm trying to say, how do you get to the next level?
Mm-hmm.
Sonically, rather than just making something sound like it's on an old tape, it sounds like it's on an old tape, but it's all it's all in the same sort of frequency spectrum. Like the sausage is pretty full
Hmm.
sonically. So it's like, how about like, because by the way, in the on the hip hop side of things, when you think of like, um, I don't want to say lo-fi because that's such a whack term for hip hop beats, but you know what I mean, like sort of, dusty, kind of stripped down hip hop beats.
Mm-hmm.
So the ones that are dope in that genre are missing entire frequency bands or like don't have a snare at all, or you know what I mean, like there's holes, like negative space.
Right.
To me, if this had more negative space, if it had more surprising choices, it would, I would like fully embrace it and love it. What's stopping me from being like, who's this person? Let me sign them,
Hmm.
is that the lack of surprise.
Right.
So that's why my reaction is mostly like, oh, this person is really good at voicing of chords and has a similar taste palette as me. But
I think the taste thing is, you mentioned, I think, on the other stream. Sorry to interrupt you, but I think you said that you picked it up from Armand, or that was something that he was like, oh, trying different things out in a track, and he's like, no, like it's good. Or I think when we were working on that, on You Make Me Feel or whatever,
Yeah.
I think I was all of a sudden I was catching inspiration and then sending you a bunch of different like parts, bass lines and stuff, and you're like, cool, but then like, does it need? If the core idea is this, like, does it need all these different things going on?
Mm-hmm.
And that's that next level. Like, I think one of the first steps maybe in production is like, can I make all the cool stuff
Yes.
sounding cool and musically
Yes.
it's right? And then the next, level up is like, okay, how much of this can I take out and still get?
Yep, 100%.
the point.
When you start feeling the fucking what's the stones, the Avenger stone or whatever, like when you start feeling the crazy power is when you're like, you know what, I can mute this and these four elements. That's the track. Like, I'm gonna mute all of this and then only keep this, and it works.
Right.
That's when you're feeling like the kind of power. And like, I'm not hearing that in this track yet. I'm hearing very good writing and
Right.
good sort of application of things that we all like in common. But it would be fun to hear something daring, to be like, you know what? There's gonna be no low end in this beat at all. Fuck it. And like, this beat is gonna have a fart as a snare. Some shit.
Right.
You listen and you're like, whoa, and it works.
Right.
That's what's dope.
Yeah, and I think important to like reiterate, it's impressive to get to this level of musicality and production already that we heard in everything that we've heard
Yeah,
today,
totally.
and in this one as well.
Yeah.
It's almost like
big up. Like it's if it wasn't dope, we wouldn't even be talking about it like this. So
Right.
like, it's already dope, but it's
Right.
how do you make it really turn heads?
Right.
That's what we're talking about.
I love it. Yeah, I agree. Well, dude, that's like we've had you for an hour and a half, which I know we're way over. Thank you for listening to the demos and hanging out and sharing these stories about you and your brother, and then your bird brother. And it sounds like you've got a lot of music that we can look forward to. What like, I guess it's A-Trak. Everyone should be following A-Trak already. It's A-Trak on all platforms. What's the new? You're about to drop a new single. Is that correct?
Yeah, Brothers Maklovich. We have a single next week, so that'll be the next thing to look out for.
Exciting! I should have asked you for a promo of that to play on the stream. Send it over.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna keep going with the rest of these demos, dude. Let you get to the rest of your day. Thank you so much again for your time, and yeah, I'm looking forward to that new music. We'll
Cool.
speak
Thanks.
soon.
Shout out to everybody sending in music. They're all really dope.
We'll speak soon. Later, dude. Thanks again.
Yep.
All right. I think it might be time to get to more demos. We're gonna keep going here, but I need to get some water, and do the other thing. So, 1 second here. Listen to some unreleased shit. I'll be right back.
Oh my, so gone is yesterday. I'm older. Time is washing over me, sweet harmony. I am now and now is me. I never been this far. Always more than one can see. So what you waiting for?
All right, we're back. More demos. That was a remix, forthcoming remix of my track No 101 by Obley. Who we got next in here? Plector Rhino. Yeah, just getting up to speed here. We got a lot of demos to go through. Stick around. We do this every Friday. More guests coming up. All right, we got Priscilla. Let's do this. You playing? Here we go. It's not a stream if we don't get a remix of this song.
Turn off the radio.
Cool. So, great. Yeah, another remix of Palm Springs. I like it. They've all been strong. New demo from Priscilla. I think there's a lot to build off of here. Like, I like the chords. The whole vibe is, you're kind of nailing it there. The mix could be a little more polished, but I think that comes, just like vocals could be a little bit higher up and they're a little bit drowned out within the mix and all the synths. I would, the one thing I would say is I'd like a little bit more variation in, like, you could maybe have a part where it drops out, because you have written different chord progressions over the different sections, which is dope. I really like when that happens, but then mostly the beat kind of like stays the same, where you just kind of like remove one thing. I think we could drop out the kick in a certain part or in a verse, or really, really strip it back, and maybe use those chords over top of like a different type of sound, like a pulse, like a chill pulse pad or something like that, just to have a little bit of variation throughout the track. Nice work. I'm looking forward to hearing more stuff. All right. We're just moving down the list with all these demos. We're not going to take any more today because we got a lot. Up next, we have Damon Steele. Also, you got to be in the chat, so I don't know if Demo's here. There he is. All right. Like your light. Nice. Damon, I like this. I think you're on to something here. With this type of stuff, it's really, it's always about the mix, but with the house stuff, I I think that you could layer another clap on there for certain parts, like at this part over here. Not much. Just another thing, nothing crazy. I like that you didn't overdo the parts, and that's the sign. That's something you often see where the clap is too loud. Just another sound on top of that, maybe, because currently the clap is not like it would just give you a little bit more energy there. I like the tone of the piano. Curious what you used there. I heard a couple of sounds, some heartbeats. Volume 2 or 1. Thank you for your support. But the vocal is cut up in a cool way. The drums and everything, like you're using the right tools to write this track. I would have to listen again with the sub. I'm curious about how much low end there is going on, because a lot of this stuff you'd have just a little bit, even just a little sign under that on the bottom end of that bass line. Not every note necessarily, but on some of those notes, if not the whole thing. In terms of sonically, Just Kiddin' does this stuff really well, and even MK, but his stuff is even a little bit more minimal. But that whole like scene, I would just be listening to like Tool Room compilations and just being like, how can I get this sonically to reach there? But I don't think you're too far away. I think you're definitely on the right track with this. Keep sending the stuff. I like it. All right, up next we got Fuse. We had like so many demos come in, so sorry if I can't get to them all today, but we're gonna try and get through as much as possible. Yeah, Just Kidding. They've been so I got to get them on the show. They're sort of changing it up, where they've been like producing for Joel Corey, who has the #1 record in the UK right now. Or if not, it was #1 for like a month straight. The one with MNEK. Anyways, that's what they've been. So listen to that one. I feel like Joel Corey's Sorry. Like that's all, sonically you're trying to compete with that, I think. Like, or at least maybe move a little bit more in that lane. But got to get those guys on the show. Fuse, here we go. Dope. Fuse, bringing the heat this week. We haven't heard this from you yet. I think it would be cool to explore more in this lane. If you got more stuff like this, it feels like it could be really cool with a rapper or exactly, obviously Joey Perp, something like that. You could even get, if someone was doing like a little bit of a singy rappy thing, I think there'd be a little bit more variation earlier, like a switch up. I think that first section could have switched up, like maybe move away from the 4/4 for a part, whether that goes to like a broken beat or halftime. I'm not sure. I wouldn't mind hearing like a melodic percussion sort of line. There's some space. I mean, I like that when it first hits, like the sounds that you picked on this are quite in your face. So maybe just something to add a little bit of variation. Like it's super cliche to be like Tams or Shaker, but something in that range. Maybe keeping it weird, but something that could tonally, like melodically, give you like an anchor. Because you have this note which slides, right? But it doesn't mean you can't have like a droney type sound or percussion thing as well. I think there might be some space for that, or you could switch it out. Dope, yeah, Vince Staples. Yeah, keep going on this stuff. I like it. It hits. I think it would hit in the club if clubs are open. The metaphorical, hypothetical, as A-Trak was saying, like this place doesn't exist right now, but hopefully it will soon. Dope. Did Funky Boy dip? I'm gonna keep moving. Danny, if Danny's in here, we're just going through all of them. Danny Dell. I know Dynamic is in here, so let's pop that one open. Oh, Danny Dell's there. All right, hang on. We'll do yours right after Dynamic. We've got all the D's together. Cool. Right vocal. So, yeah, the melodic parts, the musical parts are cool on this. I think the bass line is an octave too high. There's no low end at all. So that especially on the held notes, you really feel it there. So some of those held notes, I think, should be an octave lower, or you have, again, like add that sub element. I would reference clearly there's French house stuff going on here. At certain moments, like I would look at something classic like Alan Brack's intro or something. You do want that that feeling. It just felt like it was missing in the low end and the bass. The chords that come in initially as well. Again, I think that could have more meat in the mids, which is something that you can just do by duplicating your chords, the MIDI there, and putting it on a lower octave, maybe either the same patch, or you could do, sometimes you can just mix in like a Rhodes sound or a Whirly or a pulse like operator. If you use Ableton, will just beef things up a little bit, and that applies for pianos. I think we've seen demos like that where it's like you have a nice cordial idea, but it's a little bit thin in the mid range, so you just a little bit in that like sort of 3 to 500 sort of area. So and I would sort of tuck that in a little bit. Like not a lot to hear, but it kind of gives you some meat in the chords. Yeah, those would be my main parts, because I think with this stuff you really got to get that low end sounding right. But yeah, cool idea. I think the chords and the bass line like programming is pretty cool, like when it like kind of moves around a little bit, and maybe that. So I'm almost thinking of this as like two bass lines, because right now there's no low end. So you could have a held one. I don't know if it's the same patch. It might be a different patch for the low one. And then you could have that other thing on top where it like kind of runs around in that range. I don't know if, when it goes to ba-da-da-da-da, like that sort of idea in the bass line, I don't know if that'll translate as well. Like it might be better in this octave range rather than down an octave. So I think of almost like two bass lines, almost like a lower bass, like a sub bass thing, and then this thing over top. And it's probably not how you envisioned it, but it can work. You just got to figure out, it's like muting, and think of it like a call and response type of bass. I would play with the first move is just moving it down an octave for the main notes of the bass line. But yeah, have fun with that. I think the bass line that you wrote is pretty cool. So yeah, it's just kind of mixing choices and figuring out where the elements are best placed. Danny, you have two here. Do you want me to do Instead or Fool Again? Who else we got? I know we got Dash. We'll do Dash. Fool Again. All right. For those that are joining us, we do this every Friday with some sporadic production streams in between. Next week, we'll be chatting with Brett Blackman, who is one of the founders of Moving Castle. He is the manager for Gold Room, Hotel Garuda, Manila Killa, and a bunch of other really talented artists, and I think can speak really well to developing artist careers and what managers and teams are looking for. So switching it up a little bit, not just DJs and such every week, but that'll be next Friday at 2 o'clock. All right, here we go.
I'm sorry, that's the way it is. Tell me how you do it, 'cause I wanna get to know you better. Tell me how you do it, 'cause I wanna get to know you better. I've tried to make once now, baby, but I'm already drunk in it, baby.
This switch up is tight. Cool. Oh, one more switch up. Let's see what's going on. Cool. Danny, this is pretty dope. Most of the stuff I have is like is pretty minor. The arrangement is cool. The bass line is really cool. The switch up with the guitar, I didn't see that. That's great. That's sort of what we're talking about, like giving them like another section, right? Even if you're doing a remix of Palm Springs, you can really switch it up in a cool. Maybe you don't have to go all the way over there, but give the listener be like, oh, like shit, like it's going somewhere else over here. The stuff that I would say that maybe you could look at. The snare, the main snare is a cool sound. I feel like it could be a little punchier. It's a little high in the mix. That kind of thing is like super. It's a tough thing to dial in because you're hearing the same thing hit the entire track, right? And so it has to be perfect. I don't know if it's perfect yet. That being said, I wouldn't like necessarily throw away that sound. I would maybe try layering it with something and just shortening up the transient. The bass is a little up for my liking. I don't know. The more I heard it, I was like, okay, no, I get it. I think it could be the sustain, like it could be shorter. It just holds all because you do a lot of like grouping up, ba da da da, like ba da 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 da, and that's dope on the bass. Like you have the groove, you played it really well. I think that there's a bit of sustain and release on it that like muddies it. It sort of smears what's going on, and that this bass line sound and the way you've written it. It can be sharper and a bit shorter, like just play with like your decay, your sustain, or I never can explain which one is which, but I would look at tightening up the bass sound a little bit. Yeah, I like that first switch up, and I hated the snare that was playing there. So toss that one. I did not like it at all. It's just like from like a rock kit or something. But I love the rest of that switch up. I'm just messing with you now because it was like it's a really nice demo. But that snare was trash. All right, we're gonna keep it moving. Really good work. Yeah, like please continue to send more stuff. All right, next up we got Dashmir in the place with his homework. His homework was to write new drops for this. So, so what I meant, Dash, with the drops, was just write them back to back. I see it looks like you wrote a whole new remix, but I meant just literally just do like 16 bars back to back to back. It's just an exercise, but it's stuff that you did this. So props to you. Like that way you could almost just swap them out, right? Like say if you have like a nice verse, I think you did a pretty cool, like everything sounded. Our main feedback on your remix last week, your demo that you sent in was just everything kind of sounded like a verse type of section, right? And then so it's like if you write 3 completely different drops, then you can just drop them in and swap them out just to see, which one is hitting or which one fits or whatever. Anyways, props to you for like following through and doing this. So let's do it.
You lift me off of the ground. I close my eyes and I wait for the come down. I used to live in the now.
But did we heard the verse part again, right? We might just jump to the first drop.
And we're hopeless now, but
Might be onto something with this idea. Yo, thanks to all the new followers. Hop in the Discord and drop your demos. I don't know if we'll get to any more new ones today, but if we don't get to them today, we'll get to them next Friday. Yeah, I think you run with this one, like in this context, as like your main drop, and then just make it bigger or smaller. This is cool. Like the sounds are all right. Yeah, this is the best drop of the three. Yeah, I think the last drop is the best one. And so, like, I mean, that's cool, but you kind of figured it out. And then you could do, like, you take the, not to say use three different drops throughout a track, but maybe use that last drop as the first one. The second time you add, whatever, a lead drone or some shakers and stuff, and you use a little bit more mutes. Something that I think would help the effectiveness of the drops in a track like this is a lot of silence and mutes, right? And then just have the right snare or whatever, which you did figure out in the end. Yeah. So a lot of like different mutes, and I know you just sort of do like a gated pulsing synth thing, and I want to hear a bit more of that. You don't have to go super saw, like detune all the way if you don't want, but if you're going to do that pulsy wave thing, let's layer it a little bit more so we can have more of like, you know, the LFO like opening like on the wave and stuff, like with maybe like one saw patch layer on that. I think it was sort of the concept of the first drop, because you could sort of, you know, build that out. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. All right, dope. You did the homework. All right. Alcius. Is Alcius around? If not, we got Dwyer, DWY. Alcius is here. All right. Dope. Let's do it. Oh, yo, what time does that Lakers game start? You guys better not be making me miss the Lakers Nuggets. Okay, good. We got time.
Baby, I will get you high, so high, so high. Oh, baby, I will get you high, so high, so high. Baby, I will get you high, so high, so high. Oh, baby, I will get you high, so high, so high.
Yo, I don't have much on this. This is cool. This is a little out of my lane. I would to be really helpful. Yeah, to be helpful, I think I would need to listen to it like on with the sub and stuff a couple more times. But I don't really have much. Everything is in the right place. The mix is good. The sound choices and like I like your melodic, whatever that guitar. I keep saying drone today because I don't know how else to describe things. They're like washy pads, but like monophonic. I think that's dope. Yeah, I don't really have like nice demo. I'm not gonna sit because nothing was you know me, like I'm always looking for stuff to pick on. You know, the better it gets. I think this is pretty dope. I think I want to hear more in this lane and see like what you can do with some top lines and stuff. I think that's where the ceiling is for this type, for like you know this genre. You know, like having a good hook, not even like a full song, but like a good hook or like a verse and hook section can really, you know, open up a lot of potential. But yeah, this feels like Anjuna Deep, like in the place. I think, I don't know about mix improvements. I wasn't really hearing. I mean, I can dip again, but nothing was sticking out. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I did think that lead could be tucked a little bit. I think you could duck it a little bit, just like sidechain. I wouldn't go like super long on it. If you use something like Kickstart, for example, it would just be like the first like preset on that in terms of sidechaining, just little bits of things. I know that Wolfgang Gartner just posted something on YouTube, or I don't know if it was Twitch. I hadn't watched it yet, but he does have impeccable mixing and drum selection and things like that. And I saw a comment saying that like how basically a lot of it was showing how he sort of really uses sidechain in a technical way, not just for the effect of a synth. So I would go check that out. I mean, I'm gonna check it out just and see if there's something I can steal from that. But yeah, that's like the extra 5% of mixing. But it sounds really good. Nice job. All right. So I know that I was looking for this before, Shibal. I was looking for your remix, and I was trying to remember why I couldn't find it. Because the link was dead. Don't switch out the link. You can replace, everyone should know this, you can replace a private file. You can replace the file on it. Don't re-upload it. Don't switch the link, or else you might not get heard. Layer Dash. Thanks for doing your homework. I like the first part of this a lot more than where it ends up going. I think you got a cool vibe. My only suggestion with that first part would have been snare selection. With this type of stuff, I mean, really, with most of electronic. Oh, this is not really super electronic, but in most music, like once you have like the music ideas, which this is cool, especially that first part. Man, that drum selection is like really everything. The decisions you make. So that snare isn't great. It's not the worst snare I've ever heard. Not as bad as the one we heard earlier in that change up from Danny, but it's like it could be better. Like it just feels like out of place. When you get all kind of sound designy over here, I kind of get where you're going, but it needs like a core, like a hook, and you're kind of doing a lot. And so there's mixing, which is kind of the biggest thing when you're getting into sound design stuff. Like you're moving things around the stereo field, and that's cool. And like things are arpeggiated, but it's it's whether that's compression or using multi-band compression on groups and making sure that everything is right now. It sounds a bit cluttered. So I'd say in this sort of this section, this is all dope. Melodically, also, it feels like it's just noodling over a scale. Like I don't know what I'm supposed to what the listener is supposed to do. There's cool, like I like those little triplet hats and the rolls and stuff. You make some. You have like it's like your detail stuff is pretty cool, the granular stuff. But the core idea, I think, some new chords in this section would help maybe. Because that first one doesn't really resolve. So, yeah, I'd focus there and be like, well, what is the main point of this section? There's a lot of things. There's just a lot of things going on there. So it's like, what is the listener? They often say that the listener can only pick out perceive three things at any given time. Obviously, that's a little bit reductive. But the point is like how you take these different parts and it's like, okay, you can have a pad in there, but maybe it's not the main goal. Right now there's a lot of like arps and drum rolls and then another drum roll and things like that. So yeah, a little bit more focus in that part. Noodling a lot. Yeah, but thanks for the demo. Keep going. I like that first part. I think like I would just work on kind of building on that first part maybe. All right. Big, thick electric. Around. Dwyer. All right. We did Euphony. We got Nick Bike and Adam W. Let's do it. I know I've seen Adam up in here. think you got the idea. The intro part, it feels like the chat's not feeling the early part. I think it can work. But the bass sound could be something warmer, be more effective because that's anchoring that whole intro section before you come in with the chords. And it's just, it's that bass sound could use some tweaking. Like try some different things there, like maybe more of a live sounding bass could be a thing. When it goes into the chords, that's cool. I'm definitely getting like an 80s sort of vibe. I have issues with the end of how it resolves. It ends kind of weird. Like I'm not sure. You can do better than resolving it with those last two chords. I like the main thing. So maybe like we notice this sometimes in like where people are trying to flex on like chords and stuff without, I don't know. Like I think you can keep it simple. That feels pretty good. Even that one's okay, but yeah, that's still pretty good. No, toss that. Yeah, your main chord progression. You just got to figure out a way how to resolve it properly. This is a cool. That extra note. That's totally like a thing that I used to do it, where I just stick it in to try to do something. But if you're gonna do something like this is a solid bridge, and maybe there's a way you can work that into the main chord progression, where you just kind of move it down a step. That's cool. Lose that note unless it does like a brrr, like with hitting a couple more notes. Just like one extra note sounds kind of like a wrong note. Like I used to do that, and I was like, and then I was trying to figure out what was wrong because it's like a loop, but it's not really a thing. It just sounds like MIDI got stuck. But I like that part. So see if there's maybe a way to use that bridge idea, to resolve the main chord idea. I'm not sure if that'll work, but yeah. So the bass sound, and then just figuring out something with the main chords. But cool. I think you can. Once you address those things, and you can do some chops or a top line. Obviously, you call it instrumental. Yeah. Could be a little tighter. I don't know if this needs to be 5 minutes, but I'm curious. Like it feels like you did a remix, and then you took out the acapella. So I'm curious about the arrangement. Put the extra note in another inch. Like so, not to shit on that idea. I think that the extra note thing, it's like a 1-3-5, or you know what I mean. It's like a little like flourish, and then you would use another instrument on that, like a higher, whether it's a chime melody or something like that. Then that makes sense. Cool. What is at my parents' house with the wrong laptop? Nice. I think that's all right. Yeah, I think that's it. That we hit all of them. That I know there's a couple more that people keep sending them through, but I need to go eat. I think we covered. Oh, if Dwyer's still here, nah, he's not, because he's in like Madrid. But the ones that we didn't get to today, no, we're not doing Facebook video links. You got to figure out a way to get it on SoundCloud or Dropbox. We'll do the new ones next Friday with our guest, Brett Blackman, who is a great artist manager who can speak a lot to developing careers. Thanks everyone for hanging out. Shout out A-Trak. And I guess we should raid someone, huh? Let's see who's around. Jump in the Discord if you haven't already. It's nice there. You can get demo feedback from everyone else. There's music industry stuff going on, which we're going to get into more. Who should we raid? Raid. Yeah, thanks for sticking around. Yeah, let's raid Lonnie Love, one of my favorite DJs. I think she's doing, I don't know what she's doing. I'm going to play you out. This is a Treasure Fingers remix coming up out of my song Salvation. Have a good one, guys.
wide open when you're next to me.